I don't want to keep you all waiting because I think the buzzer is ready to go. Without further ado, I want to introduce our moderator for today's discussion is Vice Chancellor for a whole bunch of stuff, including Athletic Director at Vanderbilt University. Vice Chancellor David Williams is going to lead a conversation with many of his colleagues today about college athletics. So I'll leave you and let you enjoy the conversation. So thank you all for being here today, and happy spring.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you all for having us today. We're real privileged and honored to be here. And as I said, thank you, Gail. Isn't she a wonderful host? Let's have a hand for Gail. I'm going to have somebody introduce me to her. I'd like to take her out on a date. Actually, she's my wife. So, anyway, like I said, we're honored to be here today, and today we have a distinguished panel, and we're going to discuss the role of college athletics and higher education. We're going to take a few minutes, and I'll ask the panel a number of questions, but the focal point is to answer any questions you have. So after they give a little brief discussion on some questions, we're going to open it up to you all for questions. I'm going to let each of the panel introduce themselves by telling you who they are and sort of in a minute or so their involvement with college athletics. And I'll start to my right with Professor Shepard.
So I am Virginia Shepard. I am a professor of pathology at Vanderbilt. And you're probably all going, what is a professor of pathology doing in an athletic panel? Let me add that I was a collegiate athlete. I played tennis at the University of Iowa, so I love black and gold teams. And I have also been involved in faculty governance, particularly as Senate Chair here at Vanderbilt. And about 10 years ago, we hosted a conference on the campus of all the SEC schools and governance leaders from those schools. And we focused a big part of that meeting on the role of athletics in higher education. And it was a very spirited meeting. We had then NCAA President Miles Brand was a keynote speaker. SEC Commissioner Mike Slive was a keynote speaker. And it was pretty amazing that these SEC faculty governance leaders came together to show their support for athletics, but also concern about its appropriate place on the campus. So that's why I'm here. And I've stayed involved. I've been co-chair of a national faculty organization called the Coalition on Intercollegiate Athletics. So that's why I'm here.
My name is Candice Lee, and I am one of the administrators in the athletics department at Vanderbilt. I was a former student athlete there, played women's basketball. Also did my graduate work there, and in fact, Dr. Shepard was on my dissertation committee, so we've talked a lot about these issues. So I'm glad to be here, and in my current role, my primary responsibility is to oversee NCAA compliance at Vanderbilt.
My name is Willie Danik. I work in the local media here as a radio announcer for 102.5 The Game, so we do a sports talk show each afternoon from 3 to 7. I am also part of the Nashville Predators broadcast team. I do the pre-intermission and post-game show hosting there. I went to Vanderbilt, graduated in 1993. I played men's basketball and baseball for 3 years, played basketball for 3, baseball for 4. So I've kind of been there as a student athlete, and then as a part of the media, sort of watched through that prism, watch how Vanderbilt has dealt with all of the issues balancing that we're going to, I think, talk today some about. And also watch how the city has grown with all the local universities and how the role of athletics plays into the sports media and the community. So I'm glad to be here today.
Oh, thanks. And it's interesting because these are three people who all were college athletes, all, in my opinion, used the college athletics as a component to get a great education, and are now are professionals, some in athletics, some outside of athletics, but all that athletics still touch them. So why don't we start? Let's start with Candice. The first question I want to ask all three of you is to tell us a little bit about what you see as the state of college athletics in the United States today.
Well, I would say that I've got some mixed emotions about where college athletics is today, and I'm speaking from the perspective of what I would call big-time college athletics. So Division I, where you're seeing national competition and, you know, the sports that are getting the most visibility. I would say that while I think that college athletics clearly plays a role in American higher education and clearly is significant and should be valued, I think we're in a place right now where there's a lot of pressure to really show what our value should be and to show how we're connected to the mission of higher education. And I don't know that we've always done a good job of that. So it could be, not picking on the media, but it could be that sometimes we're not telling the right stories. I think what happens a lot now is that we're often talking about the negative things, and we don't do a great job of talking about the attributes of athletics. And so I think we're in a pretty tough spot. I'm not sure if we're where we need to be from an accountability perspective, and I'm not sure if we're always looking at the outcomes with how we impact student athletes. So I don't think we're in a great spot.
Since she mentioned media, Willie?
Well, it's a great point, because I see college athletics, what it should be is, what I see through the media is the fun part, should be the fun part, the attention you get, the crowds you get to play in front of, you're trying to win championships, the competitiveness of it. But really, it should just be sort of a gateway to making you more of a successful person, because even successful athletes that get to play professionally and make a lot of money, which is another lure of why you play maybe on the surface, you're going to be done playing by the time you're 28 or 30 years old, even if you're very, very successful as a professional. So you've got a long road ahead of you in life. And so I think it's a great tool to be an athlete and get some of the traits that you acquire by being a part of a team, being competitive, being accountable, that sort of thing. Great things that can help you in life. But unfortunately, I think there's such a huge media glare. There's so much money involved. The pressure to win is so high. It definitely gets us off track, I think, in a lot of ways. And as Candice said, I think some of the things are emphasized that really should be. We get away from the core, and I think sometimes it affects kids coming up. They only see the glow and the lights and the money and things like that, and they get away from where they're really going to benefit from being a college athlete.
And Jenny, since you have chaired our faculty senate, you've been a faculty member and a former college athlete, how would you respond to this?
Well, I would echo what my two colleagues have said, and I want to reiterate that our organization, which is a national organization mostly focusing on Division IA, or what is now FBS, we're looking at the bigger schools, the bigger programs, and the concerns I think that we have are, number one, the student athletes who are on our campuses, and are they really getting a valued education? We see a lot of kids leaving early. We see a lot of kids not graduating. The NCAA is working hard to increase academic standards, and we applaud that. But I still think that there are some issues that, as faculty, we are particularly concerned about. We support athletics. We see the value of it, and we want to see it work. I'm going to open up this little box as well. I think our organization right now, although we're working with the NCAA, are very concerned that the organization itself is in a lot of trouble. And they themselves, as an organization, are going to need to look closely at their operations. There are some concerns about the scandals that have happened recently and how they've handled those. So there are a lot of things that we're looking at, but as faculty, we're primarily interested in making sure that the students get a valuable and usable education, graduate, and go on to successful careers. I was telling Willie earlier that if you line up 100 basketball and football players and you say, okay, how many of you think you're going to the pros? 100 hands will go up. And then if you say, okay, only 2 to 5 of you are going to go to the pros in reality, how many of you think you're going to go? 100 hands will go up. So there needs to be some reality checks here.
Well, Jenny, you sort of walked right into the second question that I want each of you to ask to, and so I'll start with you. Sort of the oversight for college athletics has been vested way back when Teddy Roosevelt was president in the NCAA. And as you said, the NCAA is under some scrutiny now. So what are your views about the NCAA's ability to oversee college athletics with all of the money and all of the scandals, as you say, in different aspects going in? So I'll ask each of you that, but I'll start with you, Jenny.
I think, again, I have some mixed feelings about that. There's a part of our group that views the NCAA as the only hope right now, and it is the organization that we have to work with. They have the regulations. Their book needs to be cut in by about 90%. But what they've tried to do is throw regulations and enforcement of those regulations back onto college campuses. And we view that as really relinquishing control that they now have of some of these regulations. The other piece of this is that if maybe the NCAA should go away in its current form and something else, and I don't know what that is, could replace it that would be more streamlined, more effective, and would ensure the integrity on our campuses. So that's kind of, I think, where we stand right now. We're still working closely with the NCAA, hoping that they can become more streamlined, as well as continue to regulate college athletics.
Candice, Jenny talked about this big rule book. I mean, part of your job is to make sure that one of those big Division I programs that plays in the SEC with its 330 student athletes complies to it. So what do you have to say about the NCAA and its abilities?
Oh, we don't have enough time. Now, I have a microphone and a captive audience, and this question is a loaded question, but I will say that I think the NCAA has a very tough job, and when I'm talking myself off the ledge, I'm reminding myself that what they're trying to do is really difficult. You know, they're trying to govern intercollegiate athletics, and you know, universities have a certain level of autonomy, and when you look at Division I, there's a lot of diversity in Division I, and they're trying to write rules that apply to everybody. And I don't know how you do that and be 100% effective. I don't know what the alternative is. I mean, I think that right now, you know, there should be a large governing body that everybody's accountable to, that sets the standards and sets some expectations and is reasonable and is consistent. And that's a bit idealistic, but I think that's what the NCAA is trying to do. I think they have very, very good intentions, but I think that what hurts them the most is the inconsistencies that they have. You know, they really posture themselves as a higher education association that is in support of the student athlete, but they will be the same group that, you know, will put rules in place that are not necessarily student athlete friendly. You know, they may protect the institution and not the student. They may protect the coach more than the student. They may, you know, I'm telling you, I can talk about this for days, but I don't want to be inappropriate. But I would say that their jobs are hard. Their job is hard, but I do think there's got to be a better way. And I think on top of that, what hurts the governance structure for athletics is that most of us also answer to a conference. And so, you know, it's a very interesting model. You know, there are rules that we have at the SEC institution that we won't name that has 330 athletes in the city. There's a set of rules there. There's a set of rules that the SEC has that we have to answer to that might be more rigid than the NCAA, and then there's the NCAA. And so it's not black and white. It's not simple. And so I don't envy the job of the NCAA, but I certainly think that they could do a lot better.
Willie, you have to conduct a sports show where obviously you're, at least part of the time you guys are talking about college athletics. How does the role of the NCAA and what you all seen play into that?
It comes up a lot because it's so competitive. Most of the perspective of our listening audience is the team I'm interested in, are they winning? Is my coach doing a good job? Are they going to win enough games so that me as the fan, I'm going to be satisfied? Have they won the championship in the last 5 years? Have they made the NCAA tournament? It's all about that. And so getting back to Ginny's point, the NCAA is very well intentioned, and I like the phrase she used, it's all we've got. right now. And we've had discussions on our show many a time, is there a better way to do it? I mean, if you go over to Europe, there's a really different way that they set up how athletics is part of the community. It's really not attached to your school in a lot of ways. It's more of a club system that's separate from your school. But since this is the system we have, it comes up a lot because it's very easy for somebody to say, I want to keep my job. In order to keep my job, I have to win, and therefore I'm going to take the risk that the NCAA won't find out the corners that I'm going to cut in whatever form or fashion you want to think, and there's a lot of them. And they might rationalize it by saying, hey, I didn't break the law. You know, I'm not going to jail. I'm just trying to win and keep my job, feed my family. There's any number of ways you can do it, but when you do that, you're compromising a lot of really the honor that we're trying to have here. As Candice says, it gets away from being about the athlete. It's more about the money. It's more about you personally trying to keep your job. So I think that's the conflict that you have a lot, especially as the stakes get higher and the money gets bigger.
Last year, when we had the SEC basketball tournament in New Orleans, and that final game was played between University of Kentucky and our own Vanderbilt University. There were maybe 15,000 people in attendance. I'd say probably no more than 600 were wearing black and gold. The rest were in that, what color is that? Blue?
Big blue.
That Kentucky blue. And of course, we were victorious and won the SEC tournament. As I stood there, I thought about the contrast between those two programs. Kentucky went on to win the national championship, as we know, and just about every one of those kids who played, I think at the time of the 7 or 8 kids that Coach Calipari played, only one of them was a senior. They all were other freshmen and sophomores. They all left and went to the pros. On the other hand, Vanderbilt had 7 seniors on that team who had stayed the length of the time here, and all of those graduated. And we actually lost 8 kids because one of our kids went out early to go to the pros. What does that say about where we are in college athletics and what's the future for it? And I guess what I'm saying is, in the Kentucky example, it's really, and they've bought into it, it's really the concept of one and done. Come in, play a year, let's win a championship, go to the pros or wherever, we'll bring another group in. We basically sort of take the time that a meal well done is one that takes time. And we're going to put on teams, and as you can see this year we had sophomores and juniors. We didn't have a great year, but all of those kids will be back. And at one point they'll be seniors and they'll graduate. So why don't you each comment on that? Willie, let's start off with you.
Well, first of all, I know that the Kentucky fans get very defensive when you start talking about this. If there are any Kentucky fans here, they're everywhere, right? There's got to be a few. Yeah,
well, let me qualify that. We have nothing against Kentucky. I mean, they're doing what they think they need to do, and that's fine. It's just comparing two models that two different schools use now, and what does that hold for the future for college athletics?
Yeah, and that was last year's team for Kentucky was a tremendous team, one of the better teams that we've seen over the last several years, especially because they were so young, they were so advanced basketball-wise. And the NBA probably has something to do with it, particularly in basketball, but again, getting back to, I think, the point, sometimes you can lose sight of what it's about. A lot of kids, some of the top, and this is where Kentucky recruits. They've got great fans and they have a great place to play. So the player is going to sometimes choose Kentucky without maybe thinking about all of the school stuff. They might say, boy, Kentucky, so-and-so was there a couple years ago. He played 1 year. He's in the pros, and look at him. He's playing great. He's making a lot of money. He's living the dream. I'm going to be that next guy that goes there. Well, this year's Kentucky team had the same kind of crop. It was a new group of players, a lot of them freshmen. It didn't go as well for that group as it had for a couple of the groups before that. So what happens to those guys? It goes back to Ginny's thing. I was one of those guys. When I came to Vanderbilt, yeah, I thought I was going to go to the NBA. I thought I was going to pitch for the New York Mets and that kind of thing. And I played as long as I could. But you always have to have in the back of your mind, what happens, well, what's the fallback? Sometimes I think it's too easy to miss the fallback, and then where are you when you're 23 or 24? That's the risk that I worry about for the Kentucky model, where, hey, yeah, come to Kentucky, play for a year. If it doesn't work out, you maybe have to go to another school. Sometimes if you don't go to the pros, you know, they got that next group coming in. They don't have that spot reserved for you. It's not more about you. It's more about the program. Can you go to class if you wanted to get your degree? I'm not sure. I mean, these are all things that are very complicated. It's not like it maybe used to be several years ago when, yeah, you're going to go for 4 years. You're going to give the best you can, and you're going to get your degree. So, like I said before, even if you make it to the pros, the education becomes even more important at that point. If you don't know how to manage all of the things that are coming your way, all the accolades, all the money, things like that, you're going to be back to square one all too often. There's a documentary that James Franklin, I know, showed to his group. We've talked about it a lot. I don't know if anybody has seen it, the 30 for 30 documentary that ESPN did on, it's called Broke. It's called how a lot of very, very successful athletes from all walks of life, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you went to college, didn't go to college, man, woman, black, white, anything, so much of a high percentage of them are bankrupt or have serious monetary problems, no matter how much, whether they made $5 million or $50 million or $100 million, they didn't know how to manage it. And a lot of that, I think, goes back to the building blocks that they had in college. The priorities were a little bit off. And so I think that's where it comes back to the Kentucky model versus some others.
Jenny?
Well, I guess my comments, I would frame them coming from a faculty point here. I really think that the faculty side, the academic side, has really failed in this respect. I think that we haven't probably pushed enough to ensure that this is truly still a collegiate model, that the primary goal of these kids is to come to get a degree, to get an education while they're playing sports. That does not mean to say that we shouldn't have a player pop out early and go on to a successful pro career and then maybe come back. Maybe there are other models that we can extend, you know, their scholarship beyond the time it currently is so they can come back. Faculty have been chided for not stepping up and taking more of a role, and of course there's a balance there, because then we're told that we don't know anything about athletics, we don't know anything about budgets, we shouldn't be involved. But we do know about course integrity, and we do know about educational programs and academic requirements. I used to have a conversation with Miles Brand that I just did not understand how they could accept the MBA rule of 1 year in college, because we knew that some kids were going maybe a semester, and then second semester they really didn't have to complete and they'd go off to the pros. But the MBA insisted on a 1 year post-high school. And it just is kind of meaningless for some basketball players. Maybe better models are baseball or some other sport, but I think we're doing a disservice to these kids, and I think it's really maybe on the academic side of the institutions to stand up and say, we support our presidents, we support our ADs, we support our vice presidents. We need to ensure that this is an educational experience.
Candice, you see these kids, and obviously being at Vanderbilt, you know the involvement it takes from your role and others as it relates to the compliance piece, the academics piece. I would assume it probably would be a lot easier if you only had to, as Jenny said, to worry about the kids for a semester as opposed to 4 years or maybe even 5 years if they've been redshirted. So wouldn't you think the Kentucky model is kind of cool?
This is from the boss, so I'm not
Yeah,
right. Well, I agree with everything that Jenny and Willie said, and I think, I think this issue though is more than just college athletics problem, because I think this is there's society has really invested in this problem, and I think it's difficult because most institutions want the kind of talent that would allow a kid to be able to go to the NBA in a year. I mean, that's how you win national championships, with kids who are talented, or kids who can work really hard, or kids who kind of get it. And so I think sometimes coaches are drawn to that because the immediate reward is worth it. But that's just another example of not putting the student first. However, the student, you know, if there's a really tiny percentage of student athletes who have the ability to go make more than all of us might make in a lifetime, I can't say that they shouldn't do that. I don't think that at Vanderbilt that we can make a living off of having those kinds of kids at our institution, because we're not just about them as athletes. You know, that doesn't fit with our philosophy. We would love that kind of talent year in and year out, but you know, part of it is that these kids come in and sometimes they've been told since the 6th grade, they're told, oh man, you can make it at the next level. You know, they think they can take care of their families that way. There are messages that we're driving home as a society that I think really reinforce the issue. And I think that, I mean, high school basketball is on ESPN all the time now. You know, people knew about LeBron James when he was 11. Like that's not, you know, he was in the 6th grade and he knew that he was going to play professionally. But we can list out the LeBron James of the world. You know, Sean Kemp, and that's kind of going back, but you know, people who
Sean
did,
Kemp.
remember
Yeah.
Sean
Oh yeah,
Kemp?
I'm with you.
Moses Malone.
Yeah.
Is that another one? That's another
But
one.
so many people think they're going to be that,
Exactly.
when they're not. There's only, like you said, we could list them on a sheet of paper, maybe 20 spaces of all time. We're talking about the last couple of generations, but a lot of kids just think, and unfortunately there are coaches that will tell you, yeah, you can be the next LeBron James. If you come here, we'll get you to the NBA or to the NFL or to Major League Baseball. And sometimes that's not the whole message. That's great. We want you to be successful, but let's have the different layers there to make sure that you're successful, whether that works out or not, because not everybody's LeBron James.
I once had a basketball coach that told me, I asked him about his players' college basketball coach, and I said, you got 15 kids here, obviously they're all not going to make it to the pros. And he was, shh, don't let them hear you say that. And I said, well, that kid hasn't played in 2 years. I'm sure he knows he's not going to the pros. He says, as long as they still believe there's that one chance, I'll get the best out of them. Once they realize there is no after, he says, I'm going to have a hard time keeping the kid in the program. And so that is a factor. But, you know, Candice, you raised something in that's very interesting. You talk about our philosophy and our mission, and Jenny, you talked about sort of the faculty, and that's what the kids are there for. But in order for a place to do that, I guess we have to be sort of content with the fact that we're really playing an uneven game. I mean, the fact of the matter is we're playing against schools that basically can take a one-year outlet, can go and get the very, very best basketball players, because as you said, Willie, they've all been told they're going to the pros, so why should I spend 4 years in college? Let me go. I'm only doing this because I can't go right now anyway. And so I guess we have to accept the fact, you know, we had great celebrations in the fact that it was the first SEC tournament we won in 61 years. Hopefully we won't have to wait that long. But the fact of the matter is, with the pressure on the coaches to win championships, isn't that kind of backwards here? Or do we just say, well, if you win a championship every 10 years, that's fine because we're graduating kids, while Calipari wins 9 of them?
I mean, we send mixed messages in college athletics all the time. That would be the theme, I think, mixed messages.
Well, let's open it up to the floor for any questions. Any questions you guys would have for anyone in the panel? Yeah, right here. Well, yeah, those models are being looked at, and for full disclosure, I appreciate you saying what you said about Vanderbilt. Just so you know, Vanderbilt graduates over 90% of its student athletes, and the average GPA for the 6 consecutive years over 3 points. So we do basically, and they don't get any dorms or any special food or anything. So we pride ourselves on that. But I mean, we still have weight. I think we have a question over here. Yeah. Jenny, you want to try? I think she asked a question, which I think is a good one. What can the NCAA, I mean, recognizing that the NBA has basically said you can come after 1 year, is there anything you think the NCAA can do?
Well, I don't know that I can totally answer that, but I think that the models that exist currently in baseball, for example, is a good model. And I think, isn't that you can go out after high school or you can go out after 3 years?
Correct.
So at least students are getting 3 years of an education with a hope of coming back after they play in the pros. And I think something like that at least gives kids 3 years in an institution of higher education. The 1 year model is just not viable, and it's not providing anything for those kids that I can see except 1 year of preparation to go into the NBA. And I just think that's got to go away. I've never agreed with that.
As far as the injury, too, I think that's an important question, because I think a lot of, remember, the mentality of a lot of athletes, student athletes, is I'm going to be that 1%. I'm going to make it and make a lot of money. So there is always that fear of, like what happened to Kevin Ware, or during the football season, one of the best examples was a kid named Marcus Lattimore, who was a very, very talented running back and had a very severe knee injury. He's trying to work his way back. And so that resonated with a lot of people going, boy, he should have gone out, should have gone pro last year because he could have gotten his money. I mean, but it's such a on the surface, shallow thing to say. I always seem to try to be the guy that fights that when we have that discussion on the air, because on the surface it does seem like a logical thing to say. But again, if you're not prepared to handle the money anyway, the money's going to be gone eventually. And there are very few injuries these days, I think, that will set to be career-ending. I think most injuries, 90% of injuries that you sustained, you will recover from, especially in this day and age. There also are insurance policies, correct me if I'm wrong, that you can, if you're that elite, there will be ways to insure, basically your body. You will be able to protect yourself just in case you do have that catastrophic injury.
Sure.
So in response to your comments here, I just wanted to bring up something that hasn't been really stated, and that is that there are only about 15 or 20 programs that are in the country that are actually in the black in their athletic programs. It may be slightly higher, but many of our athletic programs' budgets are increasing at a dramatically different rate than our university budgets. And so you'll read a lot about, for example, a colleague of mine at University of Oregon, huge debt that they've maxed out on their debt, and they can borrow no more. They're trying to build these phenomenal facilities, all the while that their academic budgets have stayed flat, their faculty are getting no raises. I mean, all of those kinds of issues are happening a lot on our campuses. And I think this is a part of it that we're not talking about, but really has a lot to do with, can we sustain this model? Can we really sustain it? And it's kind of the front porch of a lot of our universities, but at what cost? And so I think we're eventually all going to have to, on our campuses, take stock of what can we afford if the NCAA does go away, what outlandish costs and pay for play and all kinds of things are going to come out that we maybe as Vanderbilt cannot participate in. So it's a very, very complex issue right now.
Yes. Well, I'm going to let Candice handle that because actually there's a thing called life skills, and at Vanderbilt it actually reports to Candice.
So from an NCAA rule perspective, the NCAA does require that all member institutions provide an academic support program of some sort, as well as a life skills program. And they leave it to your discretion how you want to model it. So some institutions will have mandatory classes, like you said. Everybody has some form of a program. I think the challenge, though, so this is a great idea, right? Why don't we just put these kids in a class? Why don't we just assign them to mentors? Why don't we just make them understand what they need to do? But when you're talking about elite student athletes, they're seeking their advice usually outside the university, which is problematic. But you know, your athletes that are good enough to go be multimillionaires, and the ones who have the insurance policies, because there are student athletes, I mean, you know, we can insure student athletes, so if they suffer an incapacitating injury and they can never play again, they can walk out with some money. We can also provide insurance policies or arrange insurance policies that will make up for loss of value. So if I'm Marcus Lattimore and I was projected to go in the first round, but now because of my knee injury I'm going to go in the 5th round, I can get some money for that too, right? Because there's now money that I would have gotten that's now not in my hand. Well, the problem is that, and from what I understand, Marcus Lattimore is a great kid, but part of the issue is that there are a lot of third parties that are involved. And sometimes parents are there, sometimes they're not. Sometimes parents are knowledgeable, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's the high school coach, it's the legal guardian, it's the grandmother, it's the neighbor. Part of it is that as an institution, we're not able to always control the message. But to answer your question, yes, we have that at Vanderbilt, and they do a good job.
Any other questions? Yes. I'm not sure that I could tell you the percentage. I can tell you, and then maybe, Willie, you may be able to talk to this from a media point of view. We take extreme due diligence and precautions. We have mandatory drug testing. We have random drug testing. We have now one of the things is Candice says it's all over the place, and at our last SEC meeting, we spent about an hour and a half debating whether or not there should be a mandatory SEC drug policy, which 4 of us supported strongly, the other 10 did not. But we have our own university policy, and it's pretty heavy. If you test positive the first time, you have to go into an educational program and you'll be pulled from competition. If you test positive a second time, you'll be pulled out for a whole year, and if you get tested the third time, you will no longer be on Vanderbilt's athletic teams. Not everybody does that, and we test not only for what the NCAA would say is cocaine and things like that. We test for marijuana, we test for performance drugs. The interesting thing about testing is to do it correctly, it needs to not be done by us because we don't want to show any bias in it, and it is extremely expensive to have a third party, which we use, that actually comes in and tests you as much as you need to do. But our student athletes, I could pick up the phone right now and call one of the people that are sitting in here from here, and we can have any student athlete on our campus tested within an hour. They get tested? We generally, at Vanderbilt, we generally get 1 to 2 positives a year. 335 student athletes. We usually get 2. I think in my 13 years involved in it, the most we've ever had is 3 student athletes in a year. Willie, why don't you?
It's a good question. It comes up a lot when this time of the year comes around, because it seems like every year, every couple years, there's a Florida Gulf Coast, a team that was not on the radar at all, wins a couple of games in the NCAA tournament, and now all of a sudden is the talk of sports for a week. It's a very small window, but man, they get all kinds of exposure. So sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. I mean, the lure is, hey, wow, we've got the national spotlight. And what a lot of studies have shown, I can remember when Northwestern went to the Rose Bowl back in the mid-'90s. That was a huge story. And Northwestern reported that their admissions, their number of people applying to the school went up significantly. And therefore, they got a more competitive student, not just for athletics, but for really their entire student body. So that was the justification of the investment they had made and the success they had had. So Florida Gulf Coast kind of has that. And so that's what a lot of these schools, that's the dream, right? It's a great marketing tool for your university as a whole, the attention you get. Florida Gulf Coast, I think, became a school in the early 90s. It wasn't even a university until then. Didn't even have basketball until the late 90s. So they're way ahead of the curve. They've sort of hit the lottery. So it's good because they get great exposure. But now what happens? Their coach gets a lot of notoriety. Within 2 weeks, he's hired by a bigger school. USC just took the job the other day, so now they've got to find the next guy in there. So it's very interesting. So the Florida Gulf Coast story would be, unless you really invested in that school, a lot of us may forget, other than we might remember those couple of games, but what happens to the school from here? That's sort of under their control now, how they handle that success.
Yes. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, we got it right over here.
Your appointment is quite different from most athletic directors at the provost level. I wondered how that impacts on Vanderbilt. Is it a good model? Is it a model that should go to other universities?
I don't know if it's a good model. I mean, you'd have to ask the people who have to deal with me as their boss. They probably would say it's a terrible model. I actually think it serves Vanderbilt well. I think that over the last 10 years we've had the model. It's probably been at least arguably the best 10 years in Vanderbilt athletics, on the field, in the pool, on the courts. Also, it's been the best academically. We're doing a lot of things, like Candice and Lori, who's sitting over here, are planning a trip now where we're going to take 20 to 25 student athletes on a service project in July to Tanzania. Nobody has ever done anything like that. I mean, we get our kids to do study abroad. We bring kids in who are academic stretches, and they end up graduating, going to graduate school, law school, things like that. So it's a model that's worked for us. You know, the question of can it work at other places, it's really about the people. I mean, it's nothing special about the model. It's the people. And Rod Williamson, who's out here at our meeting just the other day, talked about his trip. He's one of our administrators that goes with our golf teams. And he talked about how being away for the weekend with his team and how he felt about working for these kids. And I think our model works because everybody that's in it really believes in the kids. We believe we're doing this for the kids, and we don't pull out any stops in the fact that, number one, is the development of those kids as people and as students. And you got a privilege to play athletics at this place, and we're at a V, but at the end of the day, if you're not taking care of your business academically, if you're not taking care of your business from a drug point of view or whatever, you're not going to play for us. So it works for us, but it's because of all of the people involved in it. It can work anywhere. The size doesn't make any difference. You just got to have the commitment to do it. You know, I think as Jenny said, we're struggling to find ways. When I went to college, which seems like, as my son and daughter tell me, it was back in the Stone Age, we had freshmen in eligibility, and freshmen didn't play varsity. And you lost very, very few students because you got your academics, you got your transition into college, everything was fine. But also when I went to college, none of the people I was in college was thinking about going to the pros. And that wasn't the reason we were there. There wasn't money. I mean, I'm not sure the pros made much money then. And so the money that's in the game now really has changed a lot of the things we do. And dear old Vanderbilt, we're hanging in there, still trying to do it the right way.
I just feel compelled to say before, sorry, moderator, sorry. I do think it's important to say, because I think your question suggested that our model is really different, and I'm not sure if that's what you intended, but you know, he's a vice chancellor, but he's an athletics director, and over there's an associate vice chancellor, there's 3 associate athletics directors, there's 2, 3 marketing people over here. You know, we have the same areas in the athletics department that really every other Division I institution has. And I think if you'll look around the SEC, there are a number of directors of athletics that are also vice presidents or vice chancellors, so that's not uncommon.
In the back. Well, that's a good question, and I would say to you, it's hard to say how somebody reconciles that when that's not our value system. I mean, I know Tubby real well. I mean, I was surprised on one hand, but on the other hand, Minnesota saw itself as 6th or 7th in the Big Ten, even though it was had turned the program around. And what they want to do is they want to win the championship. And they felt they weren't. And I think that's that money, that's that prestige. And it is a mixed message. It would not happen under our regime. I mean, that's not the sort of thing we make decisions on. But I see it happening all of the time in college athletics. So I don't know why they make those decisions. I mean, I do know why they make the decisions, because the grass is always greener on the other side. And what they'll, you know, it's interesting. I don't know, has Minnesota found a coach yet?
I don't think so.
No, I think about 5 people have turned the job down. And I think that they'll find somebody eventually, and they'll find out that that individual will probably deliver to them exactly what Tubby Smith did, because it's the name of the game. I mean, it's not an easy place to recruit to for basketball. And Minnesota, I believe, will not allow itself as a university to go too far away from the structure of what we think universities should be. So I don't think they're going to do any better. But it's always trying to one-up people. I mean, you know, we got a great football coach in Coach Franklin, who we hired 3 years ago. And the day we announced that we had Coach Franklin, the big thing was, who? Who's he? And then after the first season and the second season and every day thereafter, we're basically fighting off the other universities who now want to hire him. And so it is a very interesting world that we exist in. Yes.
Well, I'll jump into that one. I mean, I think you can point to some universities that don't have Division I athletic programs. University of Chicago got rid of theirs, Washington University. There are many universities that have strong or medium level basketball programs with no football programs. I think for us, having been student athletes, we view that experience as being very important to our personal educational experience. So for me, that's where athletics fits into the higher education scene. Does it have to be the big power athletics that we're seeing, the big money athletics? Well, that train's kind of on its course, and I don't know where that's headed. But I personally think it's a very valuable experience. Yes. Well, you know, there are lots of boosters, there are a lot of donors, it brings in money that way, it brings in fans, it brings in community support. The one thing that we started out talking about the Kentucky basketball program. Again, I'm not saying anything about Kentucky, but one thing that I was disheartened about was that the coach wanted to move the competitions off campus. Now, to me, having the competitions within the campus is part of the campus life. And so I think we're moving away from somehow that collegiate campus model that we were so familiar with.
I also think the people that are your student athletes that do move on to other things, and I think Vanderbilt's got a lot of good ones right now, can be a really good ambassador program for your university, especially if they represent the school in a good way. And that goes back to what are you doing with the kids while they're there? You know, what type of people are you turning out? I mean, you look at guys like David Price and you know, Brant Snedeker. There's some very successful athletes that, I mean, for lack of a better term, when you see a guy on Monday Night Football or on the game of the week in baseball and it says College Vanderbilt, I think that's a marketing thing for your school, whether it's athletic or not. I think that benefits the whole university, especially if that person carries himself in a classy way, represents himself in a good way.
Well, I think it's 1 o'clock, and I think I got the signal that we need to stop now. So let me thank you all, and once again, it was a privilege and an honor to be here.